I think first and foremost, TikTok was probably created by ambitious entrepreneurs who wanted to make a dollar or make some money, whatever currency, it didn't matter. So I surmise that that's how the innovation started. Entrepreneurs who were pursuing the Silicon Valley model of startup technology, and they wanted to make it big and make a whole bunch of money. They wanted to be the new Jack Ma of China. And yeah, I'm very confident that that was the origin of it. And certainly, when you become big and visible, the government is going to get involved with whatever you're doing. And undoubtedly, the government has already infiltrated TikTok, not because the founders are particularly, you know, dangerous or they have malign intentions, but because it's smart for the government to infiltrate all of the major technologies within their border and especially those that will move beyond their borders. In fact, we've seen the same thing happen here in the United States with the Twitter files. It was a clear example that the American government, namely under Joe Biden, was infiltrating Twitter and having Twitter surrender meaningful information and data and also suppress certain types of information and data and push forward certain narratives, namely around that pestilence that was, causing the whole world to be forced indoors. So America's been doing it while they're accusing China of doing the same thing. But when China does it, they act like it's particularly evil. And we're going to get into this stuff pretty deeply. I may also acknowledge Keandre. He sent over some First Republic Bank stock. Appreciate that, certainly. I've prepared a significant lecture for you all, and I'll be thankful to those who support the work. For this took out some significant time and research, and I am certain that the insights I'll provide will be far above what you'll be able to find online from any expert source or any mainstream media outlet. So let us talk about it. First and foremost, to answer the simple question of will TikTok be banned in the United States of America? The answer is no. No, it will not be banned. The reason that it will not be banned is because we have an election cycle coming up for the presidency, 2024. And if Joe Biden was to ban TikTok before that presidential election, he would then be portrayed as fascist, as one who's trying to control media and control the press and ruin the First Amendment, even though those things would not necessarily be true based on that particular action. So certainly he doesn't want to alienate his younger voters. And may I also remind you that when you look at conservatism and liberalism, liberalism is the hopeful, optimistic inclination to believe that human beings are mostly good, they're mostly competent, they're mostly trying to do the right thing, they're mostly trustworthy, and like we're all basically the same, which is not true. And that is something that is more common among young people. The liberal ideas, these are more common among young people because they're immature, inexperienced, and unrealistic. Even myself, I was far more liberal in my youth. Conservatism is what you come to after significant experience. Now, I say that to say this. You find conservatives, they're generally older people. Liberals, they have a hold on the youth because the youth are filled with optimistic exuberance. Now, if you were to ban TikTok, something that the youth are obsessed with, brainwashed by, addicted to, then you would alienate a major piece of not only your voting base, but more importantly, the longevity of the party, the Democratic Party, that is, and also your propaganda machine. Because the young people are the ones who are sharing all of that Democrat, leftist, liberal, LGBTQ content and propaganda via Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, etc. So they do themselves a great disservice. And for that reason, we will not see TikTok banned by the Biden administration. Definitely not before this election cycle. That is completely out of the question. I'm 100% certain of that. They might be senile, but they're not dumb. Shout out to Neil supporting the work. He writes peace to the saints. Truly appreciate that. Shout out to the real ones supporting the work. Means a lot. Well, saints, and we are going in deep today. Make sure you get your notes ready. One of the saints said it's the most addictive social media ever. I don't know that I would say it's more addictive than Tinder. I think that you're going to use it more frequently than Tinder because it's a free app and it provides content, whereas Tinder provides hope, but they're driven by similar things. And I'll talk about that shortly. So, truth be told, I think Tinder will be the most addictive. Dating technology is the most addictive. And I think those things will they'll persist over time. Whereas TikTok is something that it will eventually go away on its own. Now, with all of this turmoil in the political sphere, it's going to be put to bed a little sooner, but it would have went away on its own anyways. And I'll describe precisely why it was so popular. And truth is, it has also provided some revolution in the way we utilize social media and the way social media businesses entice you, the consumer, the way they plug into your brain and psychology and use and abuse you. Shout out to Deontay, he writes, Peace of Saints, been a minute just paying what's owed. I appreciate that. Indeed, it has been a minute, for I'm a very busy man. My time is in demand, and it's expensive time. Let's get in deep. As I said, unlike those who babble, I actually come well researched with great amount of notes. I think you guys are going to enjoy today's lecture, and I appreciate you all being here. Short Stack writes, before you get started, saying I'm currently at the Incheon airport. Oh, shot, he's in South Korea. He writes, on my way to Italy, I'm leaving a girl behind and wanted to talk to her about other women. Is this a good idea? Well, it depends on what your goal is with that girl. So when you say other women, are you suggesting that she would be one of several women that you have, within your family as a wife? Context is needed, but the truth is, most cases, the lady should be on a need to know basis, and generally they don't need to know a thing. Remember that, as the master Sun Tzu instructs, prior information enables. So the question is, what might you be enabling her to do with that information, also known as intelligence? Do not be led by the heart. A man should live in the mind. So with limited context, I surmise that you might not want to tell her, but I'd be happy to talk through it. We also see this individual says Tate talks about violence. He talks about interpersonal violence. That's an important distinction. Interpersonal violence, which is often petty and meaningless. He talks about the violence of defending yourself or engaging in the combat sport, which I too engage in the combat sport, and I totally get that. But he does not talk about revolution. He does not talk about organized revolutionary action. That's the major difference. And thank you for making that note. And also, may everyone be informed that we don't mention other content creators unless you're putting it in a super chat, which means that I know that you have something meaningful to say rather than just trying to promote yourself or promote someone who is absent. You might be new to the channel. Carrying on. Yes, there are major differences that you guys are yet to understand. And in some cases, only the intelligent can really get where we're going with this. Shout to Hegemonius. He writes, we are in revolutionary times, and that is so very true. Now let's get deep here, Saints. Let's get deep. Pay attention. Now, the first question is, what is the true danger of TikTok? You could look at it as something that is as simple as an application where TikTok thoughts go on there and shake their rump, basically becoming high tech prostitutes, whereby they earn dollars and tips from strangers in the digital world. It might seem to be that simple. And at some level, it is that simple. And the reason TikTok, like say roulette, is very appealing to the commoners because it's simple. It's easy. It doesn't require thought. TikTok doesn't have long form content like YouTube. TikTok is not circled around lecture or education or anything meaningful. It's a visual feast. It's driven by your libido. That is to say, your drive for sex. It is driven by your hunger for attention. It is driven by your pursuit of yes. It's driven by your pursuit of entertainment. So TikTok sustains based on your need to be entertained, your need to pursue sex, and your need for attention. It gives you your 15 seconds of fame, not 15 minutes, because the modern human being is too brain dead to sustain their attention span for much longer than that. We also do know that, factually speaking, China serves a different version of the Tinder application domestically than it serves abroad. The domestic version of domestic version of TikTok is much more healthy for the brain, shall we say, meaning that it has educational content around science experiments and things of the nature of that nature. Conversely, the versions that we see in America, you'll often see transgenders. You'll see a lot of sexual impropriety. You'll see a lot of women twerking. You'll see it's very heavy on humor and entertainment and prank videos. As a result, we see the way this is driving our culture, and this is going to be a critical piece because I'm going to discuss the perceived threat of TikTok by the American government. So, number one, what is the threat? Well, it's been termed a national security threat. Well, is it a national security threat? What is national security? How could a consumer application threaten our national security? Is that actually possible? It's absolutely possible. And yes, it is a national security threat. But I think the way it's been portrayed doesn't really clarify the wholeness of the nature of the national security threat. And so I will be explaining that to you. But first, I must define what the types of national security threats are that we could be victim of. So let me first do that. Shout out to BMT, right? Peace of the Saints. How many books do you read a month on average? I don't count. It's irrelevant. A lot of people who are not very intelligent or who are, trying to make money on the internet, they're always talking about read books, read books. I read a lot of books. This is true. I don't count how many books I read. It doesn't matter. It matters that you read the right books. And generally, to me, the right books are the ones that are aligned with your wealth goals, the ones that teach you how to do something, or they inspire you deeply such that you are able to take action. So it doesn't matter how many books you read a month. In fact, it doesn't even matter if you read just one book. It matters what you're going to do. That's right. That's why The Black Box by Marquett Devon Burton is the best book ever written, because when you read it, it makes you inspired and you have to get to work on something. Most books you read and you're like, oh, that was great information, but it's either not something that's terribly practical that you can use in your life today, or it doesn't give you the practical steps. It's not very clear. It might give you some great quotables, but it doesn't give you the action. And I appreciate that. It was a real joy to be on that panel. Shout out to the Saint. Thanks for sharing the decorum for the space. I also acknowledge Donovan. He writes tips on door-to-door sales. This is my career. Number one, to be friendly, polite, get to the point, understand in your industry what is the number one concern or objection. Is it a price objection? Don't be scared to share the price if you're actually providing a good product. Brevity, clarity, and straightforwardness, transparency, because when you're coming up to someone's door, they're suspicious of you. If they know you're selling something, they generally are like, I don't want to buy it. I don't want to spend money. That's generally the concept. So you're usually going to close the sale by saying how much money you're going to help someone gain, or how much money you're going to help someone save, or how much of a value the product is to them. So you have to understand the driving force of the consumer, and also look good is very helpful. If you're doing door-to-door sales, what are you selling? Solar? I'd be curious. That's pretty much most of what comes to my door. May I also acknowledge George Kelly, who's very consistent with the support on Cash App. And I do want to let everyone know, as I'm flying solo, it's much easier to get to your questions via Cash App or PayPal. All right. Saint says, I found you on Fresh and Fit. You gave really good advice. I appreciate that. And unlike some of the folks you might encounter on the internet who might be pessimistic or just speaking from what they read, I speak of what I've experienced, what I know for certain. And that's why you often find that when I'm speaking, I'm speaking with passion, because these are real experiences and they're visceral. It's not what I heard somebody else say. It's what I've done. Now, Saints, let's get in deep here. You have to forgive me. I'm looking around because the technology is failing right now. Now, national security. What is really meant by that? Let's talk about national security because most people have not the foggiest idea of what this means, and this includes persons in the American government. They don't know what national security is. In fact, they scarcely even know how to provide for national security. And a major part of that is you have to have shared values as a nation. As a people, as a government, you need shared values so that you can provide for national security. Because the question is, what are you trying to secure? Presumably, you're trying to secure the mind and body of the citizenry. Well, if you don't agree on what's valuable in the human mind of your citizens, then it's going to be hard to secure it. But let's go ahead and talk through the basics of national security. Shout out to Walton supporting by Cash App with tuition. National security is as follows, as defined by Marquett Devon Bird. Number one, the most clear aspect is the physical safety of the citizenry. So when we're talking about national security, it's being able to prevent or defend against foreign threats, physical attacks, chemical attacks, bombings, invasions, things like this is very straightforward. So that's number one, physical safety. Number two, economic security, which is to say, preventing the economy from crashing, or preventing certain goods from being too expensive, like gasoline, that is petrol, or eggs, things that are staples, basics. Because when you have economic ills in your society, it generally causes unrest, might cause revolution or violence. And these are things that make life unpleasant for everyone. But more importantly, it causes government officials to either lose their head or lose their power. And they don't want to lose either. So, physical safety, economic safety, preventing social unrest, which is to say, recurrent protest. Also, there is the concept of protecting the mentality and morality of a people. You might say, Marquette, well, what do you mean by that? Well, the mentality. Now, if you have a population that has become extremely lazy, well, then they're going to stop working. That's going to, over time, adversely erode the quality of life. Excuse me, that's going to erode the quality of life and adversely affect the economy. Going to cause for a contracting economy, reduce GDP, inability to produce innovation, i.e., their weapons programs are going to decline, and eventually the empire will fall. So the mentality of the people is critical, and that is the ideas of the people, what their driving forces are, what their motivation is. If you want an example of the decline in mentality among Americans, it was surveyed that the average Chinese child, what they want to grow up and be is an astronaut. Conversely, the average American child, what they want to grow up and be is an influencer. So basically, one person says, I want to be Neil Armstrong. I want to be the guy who walked on the moon. That's the Chinese kid. The American kid says, I want to be a big booty TikTok thought. I want to be Kim Kardashian. I want to be known for my appearance, which was falsely created by surgeries. Now, just imagine. Now, can a nation of kids who want to be astronauts produce wonder weapons and produce great technology that's going to allow them to leapfrog us? Absolutely. Can a nation of Kim Kardashians produce anything meaningful? Well, not really, unless you're considering entertainment to be like the holy grail of human existence. So protecting the mentality of a people is a national security issue. Protecting the morality of a people is a national security issue. You might say, Marquette, how is that? Well, if a people somehow come under the false idea that we should legalize all drugs, then you have a situation like you might encounter in Skid Row in Los Angeles or in Frankfurt in Germany, or in a couple other places where you have drug usage all over the place, homelessness, mental illness, all on display and growing rapidly due to the inability of the government to protect the population's mentality and morality. Or they just said, okay, we're going to legalize it here, and you see the results. So if we had a decline, a mass decline in morality among the American populace, then they say things like we're going to legalize cocaine and heroin, etc. It's going to have bad outcomes. So the morality of a people is as well a critical thing to protect. It is a national security issue. I don't think the American government is aware of this. So if someone might tweet this at Sleepy Joe, that would be very helpful. So those are the critical pieces of national security. The idea is that the TikTok application is providing for the ability of the Chinese Communist Party to engage in espionage, spying in this case on a digital level, which provides for data which they can use to better understand the American citizenry at large. They can use this for influence operations, which is to say, to spread propaganda aimed at creating a particular effect, which is generally subversive. They can utilize the information on TikTok to gather what's called, well, data, of course, but also metadata. And the funny part about it is some of this information that they're gathering on TikTok is user generated, which is to say the user is giving the information that the Chinese Communist Party would need to effectively understand and influence the American citizen. And then other parts of that information are not user generated. When I say user generated, we're talking about videos, posts, messages exchanged. And then there's metadata. Metadata is data about data, which is to say they can figure out who your closest relationships are, be them friendship or romantic. They can identify who you might be having an affair with, what kind of women you're attracted to, if you're homosexual or not. All these particular things using metadata, which is to say, who are you reaching out to? What kind of videos are you watching commonly? They can even figure out what your racial group or ethnic group is. There's so much you can do with metadata. And you also have to consider, well, who are the users of TikTok? When America's so scared about information being stolen, well, it's not only because the citizens are using TikTok, it's also because there are a couple critical groupings of Americans using TikTok that we should be concerned about. Namely, of course, the citizens, but namely law enforcement, military, and the political class, the leadership, the politicians, the congressmen, or mostly the congresswomen, right? They're the ones doing this. I kid you not. There's an African American politician, female on the East Coast. She was twerking upside down on TikTok, quite vile. It shows you precisely why it probably should repeal their suffrage, and as well not allow them into leadership, because that's really a despicable display to see conducted by a woman in general, and in particular a woman who is in a position of power. She is a far cry from greater women like, say, a Barbara Jordan. She's a real despicable character, and you would have to wonder, how have we allowed a TikTok thought to reach a position of prominence and power in such a developed country? But it turns out that our country is devolving, and that is the problem. Shout out to Joshua, comes in via PayPal. He writes, tuition for the knowledge. I sent you a message on Patreon regarding potential content. Check it out when you have time. Okay, I'll make a note of that here. Okay, thank you very much for that. It's good to hear from you. Shout out to the members, all the real ones within the family. You dig? And let's dig back into this info. So now we understand what national security is. It's economic, physical safety, threats of social unrest, protecting the mentality and morality of the citizenry. And what TikTok opens us up to is the collection of aggregate data as well as individual data, which can be used to manipulate the American society as well as individuals within America, particularly individuals within law enforcement, government, and military. And this is precisely what's so dangerous. You see, intelligence agencies, they usually utilize a couple tactics to influence someone, whether it's to get information from the person or to get the person to act as a double agent, which is to say an operative of this foreign power. And TikTok is really going to empower them with being able to do that in the easiest, most efficient way. Because generally, the governments around the world have to send out foreign operatives, or they have to convert someone into a double agent, or get someone to agree to spy on their government or on persons within their enemy nation. And with TikTok, it's so much easier. Just imagine, I'll give you an example. When you have a American military man doing a TikTok video, dancing like a goofball, which is really pathetic to see a military man doing this, dancing like a goofball while on duty in uniform, full uniform, with all of his body armor, lightweight, advanced, modern body armor, all of his weaponry in front of, artillery vehicles, tanks, fill in the blank. And he's doing these TikTok videos, and it gets posted on TikTok, and the Chinese Communist Party is able to see this and look like, oh, Now we see what the standard issue, body armor is for your regiment. Oh, now we see what kind of military vehicles you guys are utilizing in this particular region. Okay, got you. Oh, and we have the metadata, which is we have the location of where you did this video. So we now are aware of where this military installation is. Oh, thank you for the classified information, little buddy. There are just so many scenarios through which this information can be negatively instrumentalized because you have individuals who are average, everyday people and thoughtless, but they're in positions that are critical and, frankly, are going to cause great ill to the society. It was quite late that the American government decided to ban TikTok from the phones of government employees. Truth be told, TikTok should have never been on the phones of government employees. And as a developer of enterprise applications for government, for large institutions, typically educational institutions, which is to say that we were able to provide pre-installed software on iPads and pre-installed software on mobile devices. The government, if they were wise, they would have locked those devices. They would have pre-installed the software that they wanted on those devices. And if software needed to be added to those devices, especially for lower level individuals, the government could allow those software applications to be added per their approval. And in addition, they obviously need tighter controls on the military. The American military is already, in rapid decline. I'm not going to get into that. That's not the current topic. I already mentioned to you guys that because of the 2024 political cycle of presidency coming up for a vote, Biden will not ban this application. We know that the media has misinformed you, making it sound like the only fear we should have is the collection of user data by China, which is essentially high-tech spying, and spying has always been high-tech, right? But it's actually much deeper than that. It's the metadata in addition to the user-generated data. And not only when they're looking at user generated data, looking at DMs between persons, the metadata lets us know who has relationships together. And this is critically important. If they can detect what person a particular politician is having an affair with based on them liking their TikTok videos or DMing certain persons or their watch time, well, that's a problem. These are the things that can be used as leverage against that individual politician or law enforcement agent. And what spies or intelligence agencies usually utilize against individuals to get them to comply or to provide information as an informant or what have you, they usually use a couple reliable means, such as sex, um, extortion, blackmail, fear. Like, these are the typical things, and TikTok provides a very clear avenue for blackmail. Now, you might ask yourself, well, how big is this problem? Well, the problem is quite remarkable in as much as the country is, last I checked, I want to say somewhere around 360 million. That's on paper. We know that we have a great many individuals who are here illegally, and it only increases by the day, particularly under the Biden administration. But there's 100 million users on TikTok within America, and they spend approximately 90 minutes per day on this application, which is tremendous amount of information. And if you're in technology, you would know that this is extraordinary. This is one of the most successful technologies ever made. So this is a scary thing. Terrence writes, in my CS degree, I have the option to choose a concentration in machine learning and AI, data science, cybersecurity, or general track. Which one would you recommend? I definitely would not recommend general track. You should always think of in terms of who's going to pay me. If they say, hey, did you focus on anything? Did you have a concentration? And you say, yeah, my concentration was general track. They're like, what? What is that? What'd you learn to do? That's not good. The people who are best paid in our society are specialists. So general track, that's out of the question. Data science, it could be meaningful, but I don't find it to be quite fascinating. And all of these things will involve some data science. I'd much rather go into machine learning and AI or cybersecurity. It's one or the other. That's it. If it were me, I would go into cybersecurity because not only is there great opportunity for wealth if you can get those government contracts, which you can, or if you become a highly valued consultant, which you can, or become a member of government. There's so much you can do with cybersecurity. You can do cybersecurity for government. You can do cybersecurity for private industry. But the most important thing is cybersecurity gives you the money and the power. You understand me? It gives you the money and the power. If you do cybersecurity, the power is always going to be there. Machine learning and AI can do the same thing, but it's not going to be as intimately linked to the power side of things. So that would be my go. Thank you for asking. And I'm wishing you much success. Computer science is a fine degree, and I'm happy to hear that you are pursuing it. Saints, we have so much good information on this lecture today. And I acknowledge Mr. Thompson who came in. He writes his question is in the chat. I will take a look at that. And if anyone else sees this question, please do go ahead and repost that as well. I see it right here. It states, when should you buy a car instead of taking public transportation? The simple reality is if you live in New York, for example, or even San Francisco, it's actually more inconvenient to have a car. If you live in the heart of Manhattan or the heart of San Francisco, it's inconvenient. If you live in Texas or Southern California, you probably are going to want a car. So as soon as there's a real necessity, then get the car. And generally, you'll know you need it because it keeps on becoming a problem. And if you find that you have a very expensive Uber bill, that might be one consideration. I should get a car. So if you have good public transportation in your city, I would not get a car. And generally, the cities that have good public transportation are on the East Coast. Chicago's a unique exception in the Midwest, and that's about it. Everywhere else, you probably would need a car if you have somewhere meaningful to go. If it's just for social purposes, I'd be thoughtful about it. If you need to get to work so that you may earn, I'd probably get one. If it's going to be cheaper than your Uber bill, I'd probably get one. The Masked Saint writes, have a verbally, physically abusive mother from age 4. Wow, that's a long time to endure that. He writes, enforced 2 cosmetic surgeries at 14. 2 cosmetic surgeries on you at 14 and 16? I have an immense hatred of myself. How do I fix this? I want to make sure I understand what you're saying. Number one, when you say you've had a verbally and physically abusive mother from age 4, that really sounds like torment, and that's very disheartening. And your mother sounds like a truly wicked individual. My hope is that you've managed to get away from her. So if you haven't done that, you should do that. Second question is, are you male or female? Third question is, when you say 2 forced cosmetic surgeries and you put on yourself, understood. If that was from your mother, I'd be curious as to like what precisely the nature was. Was it supposed to be corrective? It's like, for example, if someone has a cleft lip, which like you're kind of born with like a bit of a deformity here in this area, the cosmetic surgery kind of makes it look more standard. It's not necessarily to make you look better. Male, understood. Uh, Undoubtedly, if you had cosmetic surgeries and you didn't look better afterward, that would be something of concern. And if she forced you to have these cosmetic surgeries, the question was like, so she forced you to have it for you to look better and she paid for it? It's kind of curious. Now, when you say verbally abusive, I'm presuming that the verbal abuse was something that pushed your self-esteem down, which also added to what you refer to as the immense hatred of yourself. And the truth is, unfortunately, the peculiar human being, sadly, we take that which is external, and sometimes we internalize that, particularly when it's coming from our parents and those who should love us innately, like those who should love us just because, not because we've accomplished anything, not because we're wealthy, just because we came from them. So I totally understand how that could lead you to have disdain for the self. The truth is, if you're accurate about it being immense hatred, which is a very strong thing, then I hope you are getting some professional help to start with. But beyond that, there's much work that you have to do. And in short, it's about actually showing to yourself that you have value. So the question is, how are you going to demonstrate value such that you can see, hey, I am a valuable person. Here are the things I've done for myself, and I'm able to display that I have meaning in this world. But first and foremost, make sure that you get away from that mother of yours. So if you haven't gotten away from her, it seems like your number one priority is economic, which is to say to get yourself a strong enough income that you can move out. It doesn't even matter if you need to move in with and take on a housemate or something of that nature. And I also want to encourage you to get around a good group of men. If you aren't around a good group of men, like for example, the Saints, that's a good support group because some of us, our family is not of our choosing. And sometimes our family members are dirt bags. And just because someone shares your blood doesn't mean they're going to be a good person. Pedophiles, murderers, and killers, they too have family members. And so it just is what it is. I'm sorry to hear that. Saying thank you for being brave enough to be vulnerable and share that with us. I'm wishing you much success and recovery, and I encourage you not to hold on to that's negativity. Carrying on, and I want you guys to remember that my prediction is that Joe Biden will not ban TikTok, even though we know that TikTok is certainly used for Chinese propaganda as well as Chinese influence operations. Now, another very fascinating piece of what's going on with this TikTok situation, and mind you, America is not the only folks who have spoken ill of TikTok. Pretty much all of the European countries, the Western countries, the countries that are primarily white, they've spoken poorly of China, the Chinese Communist Party, except when they're doing business deals. Like the Australians speak negatively about China, negatively about the CCP, but then they try to do a business deal with the government. They host Xi Jinping and they act all friendly. It's quite comical. The European nations are very dishonest, backstabbing nations. I hate to say it, but we saw this happen with Muammar Gaddafi. He was being hosted, by the Western countries, Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama having photo ops. He had good relations with the French and the Italians. Then they all turn around and kill him, with no trial against all international law. It's quite sick and sad. We must concede that the Europeans have been examples of high culture, but low morality. They've been examples of many great things, but never an example of morality. Anyway, so ironically, they're currently condemning China, which is comical. Now, the implication of what's happening with TikTok has meaningful implications for commerce, for technology and innovation, for finance, that is to say, raising money for technology companies. And I want to speak to my specific experience because I'm probably the only commentator on YouTube that's actually done what I'm about to describe, which is to say, one, I've traveled to China many times. I've been toured through China, through many cities by the Chinese Communist Party. I've been offered significant amounts of money from China, essentially the Chinese Communist Party. I've been briefed by the Chinese on their Belt and Road Initiative, like they themselves told me about it. And I've been there with a group of innovators from around the world in fast, high growth technology companies. So I have a very good sense of how they operate and do business from firsthand experience and how they basically take every effort to bring talent there. And I get a sense of what their big picture is about. So I want to give you a little bit of context on what this means in terms of the things I mentioned: commerce, technology, innovation, and finance. And finance is a very critical piece that you wouldn't understand unless you're an international business person who's been successful at a high level. So we're going to talk about that. And that's what's been missing for the news. And it's really important because, like, for example, Elon Musk is not an American, he's South African. So international business for innovations like Tesla and like the beauty and speed of their electric cars and like his SpaceX program, this requires international business, international cooperation, and international financing. When you're raising $1 billion, you might get 300 million from America, you might get a 100 million from UK, you might get another 100 million from Saudi, 100 million from United Arab Emirates, 100 million from here, 100 million from there. When you're doing big deals, you're pooling resources from a number of wealthy locations around the world: Monaco, Israel, you name it. And so this is actually a bit dangerous to technology, innovation, finance, and business. But most people who don't really do business at a high level don't have a concept of how dangerous this potentially is. Shout out to Scotty. He says, I respect you, Saint. I made a YouTube video exposing some of the characters on the Las Vegas Avengers Peace to the Saints. Matthew writes, "Peace to the saints. Appreciate. Thank you for the support." G Chillin writes, "I'm thinking about booking a consultation to go through the process of sourcing a manufacturer for some clothing pieces. We'll speak soon. So shall it be." Don't think about it, be about it. It's actually quite funny that you say that because just today I was rewriting one of my quotations, which I think I might have here. Where I put it, but it goes something to the effect of, let's see. Here it is. Quote, "Do not allow thoughts to float. Act immediately on actionable thoughts." Do not allow thoughts to float. You ever have thoughts just floating around in your head? You're like, I'm gonna do this at some point, or I'm gonna get around to this, or it's just bugging you, gnawing at you, like something you know you should have done, but you didn't do, or you're gonna do it later. Those are the things that rob you of your peace. Floating thoughts is what I like to call them. Shout to Heels In supporting the work via Venmo. He's the only one that uses Venmo. Uh, but I want to encourage you all to know that anytime you have an actionable thought, you should just go ahead and take action on it. Okay. Period. Period. That's all there is to it. Just go ahead and take action on it. Don't think about it, be about it. One of our biggest issues is that we have thoughts in excess, deeds in lack. That's our problem as human beings. That is our exact problem. Now, there has been I don't think it's been promulgated yet, but it's called what is it called? The Restriction Act. I believe it's called the Restriction Act. And this is something that would basically give powers to the Secretary of Commerce. And most of you are at home like, yo, hold on. The Secretary of Commerce, like, who that? Who that? I've never heard of the Secretary of Commerce. And why are they having their powers expanded? I don't know if I'm signing off on that. During the Biden administration, we've seen a very curious expansion of powers of various government roles, some of which we've never heard of, some of which we never knew were a role, and some new persons, new characters like Dr. Fauci. We're like, who is this guy? We never elected him. How did he become so powerful and influential and able to control your life? Well, yeah, I know it's problematic. We got another instance of this, which is potentially about to occur with this restrictive act, which basically would empower the Secretary of Commerce to ban foreign technology, not only softwares like TikTok, but also electronics and hardware that are produced abroad by other countries. And this is something that we should think twice about, in as much as we do know that the future of commerce, and shout to Barack writes, peace to the saints, appreciate that. We know that the future of commerce is smart technology. Everything is going to have technology infused. And so what you're basically doing is allowing the Secretary of Commerce to investigate foreign technology. And much of everything that we have says made in China. So this poses a bit of a problem because everything's going to be smart in the future. Smart chairs, smart clothing, everything's going to have technology embedded. So that is going to make me curious as to, well, how do you figure out which of these things to ban? And are we finally figuring out a solution to the fact that China pretty much produces everything that we use, which basically is destroyed our economy, our productive base, and our self-esteem and our future as a nation, and probably our ability to even have a proper wartime economy? Mm. So, you know. Anyways, I think that's going to be harder to implement, and it sounds good, but government is good at creating policies or projects that never get quite implemented. I think the best metaphor is when you're driving along a road and there's construction, and you're like, dang, haven't you guys been constructing this road for like a year and a half? Why does it take so long? Give you a quick example of what government does. In my neighborhood of my home, I bought the very first home in the neighborhood. Now the neighborhood has 83 homes that are completely finished, 5-bedroom plus homes, right? 3-story homes, all completed. When I first moved in, the government had a plot of land and there was a sign that said park coming soon. Now, what does a park require? It doesn't require plumbing, doesn't require anything significant, right? You got 83 3-story, 5-bedroom homes have been built, but the park, they haven't even broke ground. That's the government. So will they be able to effectively implement a policy that limits Chinese software and electronics that have the capability of taking user data that they could use for negative purposes. I highly doubt they'll be able to do that when China produces basically everything that we have. It says made in China. If they do implement that policy, I think it'll largely be to the good. It'll be to the good of the American national security agenda, and it'll also be to the good of the American economic future, because then we'll be removing competition with cheap labor in China. We'll be restoring our productive base in America. And that's a meaningful piece of national security, because what you might not know is the only reason we were able to survive and thrive in World War II is because we had a very strong consumer economy and consumer production capacity. So we basically took all of these factories we had for producing Ford motor cars and all of these other things that we used to sell, and we turned that into producing munitions, weapons, spare parts, etc. And we were churning them out quickly at good quality. Now we really couldn't do that because most of the things that you and I use on a daily basis are from abroad. And that's why we've seen a lot of our industries, our domestic industries, like the automotive industry in Detroit, our steel industry, and other, even our oil industry is under attack. We've seen these things fall apart. So that's bad policy making. And sometimes we see the bad policy making is not a result of the stupidity of the individual politician. Sometimes it is, but it's often the result of the undue influence of foreigners or foreign governments. Like, for example, when you have Hunter Biden clearly has financial relationships with Ukraine and China. And so does Joe Biden himself. So when they make policies that are favorable to these nations, we shouldn't be surprised. Now, here's the comical thing. How ironic is it that the United States government is trying to block out the Chinese software application where chicks shake their rump because it's dangerous and may be bad for national security, yet you guys are doing deals with the same governments that you claim are our enemies, Ukraine, Russia, China. Come on now, this stuff is all ridiculous. And that's precisely why I want you guys to know. Wow. Oh no, it's all good, Hills. And I appreciate the support. You're one of the real ones, one of the men who pay what they owe. That's why I want to be clear that whether it's Republican or Democrat, the left and the right, as has been stated, as two horns on one devil. And it's basically true that there's very little difference between these two groups. May I acknowledge Jamie writes, thoughts on the probability of CBDC taking over? I don't know what CBDC is. It doesn't immediately come to mind. CBDC, couldn't call it. Shout out to Hills In, came back again on Venmo. Appreciate you. I acknowledge Marcos. He's one of the saints who's been confirmed. You dig? That means he's a real one. You heard me? That means everybody signs off on him, show him respect. Central bank digital currency. Oh yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that makes perfect sense. It's in the favor of the government. But let's not be foolish here. Let me teach. Let's not be foolish here. Do we not already have digital currency? I mean, come on, let's not be foolish here. What is a credit card other than digital currency? When you swipe a freaking credit card, this is digital currency. That's what digital currency is. Fiat money, paper money, is the dollar that you hold in your hand. If you're not holding the dollar in your hand, but you're engaging a transaction, that's digital currency. Credit cards, checking, a bank debit card, that's digital currency. We're already in digital currency. You see, sometimes you guys are looking at something, but you don't know what you're looking at. The governments of the world, they want you to be banked. There are many initiatives to make sure that everyone is banked. A lot of places in sub-Saharan Africa, they're very cash heavy. They have open marketplaces where you show up to the marketplace, you trade and sell goods, and they usually use their paper currency. They want you unbanked, excuse me, they want the unbanked people, meaning the ones who are heavy on paper currency, which is generally the mom and pop shops, the old world marketplaces, crime, terrorism. These are all situations where people try to be unbanked. They don't want to use, digital currencies such as the credit card swipe, the bank debit card, or the, things like that, because those things are traceable. They want to use paper currency. That's the closest thing to Bitcoin we got today is paper currency. It's harder to track and trace. And it's really hard for the government to know how much of it you have. Huh? Yeah, if I was operating a physical marketplace in Lagos, Nigeria, and I go there and I sell my goods every day for cash naira, the government has not the foggiest idea of how much money I have. Now, if I were to be banked, then they can tell you precisely. Marquett Devon Burton has $32 million and it's spread across 4 accounts. And the names of the banks are these. Freeze all those accounts straight away. Yeah, they can get that done ASAP. You know what's worse? They can even get that done with your international accounts as well, and then lock you up in a Romanian jail. Okay. So the point is the central bank digital currency, it's already existed. When there was a concept of a credit card or a debit card, that's the digital currency. What'll come next, it really doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, all they're attempting to do is to trace, track, and control. And they already doing that, and they're going to be able to do more and more of that, particularly when you don't fight back, when you don't vote, when you don't protest, and when you're not willing to engage in organization, bravery, and violence. So that's what it is. The worst thing is, and I hear a lot of these crypto kids saying, oh, use crypto. Crypto's the future. Crypto's going to save this. Is it really? Do you not understand technology? So you're buying and selling crypto, right? And you say that it's like untraceable. Well, that would be true. Like, did you access the internet on your own? Did you use homemade internet, or did you use internet that operates through an internet service provider? And do you have an IP? Do you know if your internet transmissions are being tracked? I mean, probably, right? And is it possible for someone to remotely, use spyware, maybe a government or even maybe an individual hacker or group of hackers, to use spyware and track your screen and see what you see as you do it? Yeah, if you're engaging something on the internet, it's probably being tracked. And the truth is that you're not as covert as you think you are. You're fooling yourself. You're fooling yourself. You'd be better off having paper money in your hand than having, these transactions on the blockchain thinking you can't be tracked. Come on now. Shout out to Mike. He says, everybody watching, but they won't support the work with tuition, and they won't even click the like button. And that's crazy. And myself, like, I wrote this on one of my old transcripts from Berkeley. I come in with notes. It's my envelope to my Johns Hopkins transcripts. I got notes here. I got more notes here in this book. And you almost, that's people wonder, why don't I go live very often? Is because I, like you, want to feel appreciated, because the perspective that I'm giving you is more sophisticated, more experience-based than anything you're hearing on the internet. How many of the persons who are giving you the news or discussing the issue can say, oh, I've done business with the Chinese Communist Party. Hey, look, here's 30 videos of me going throughout China with translators pitching my business, and they offered to set me up in a factory to produce my hardware technology and run my software business and give apartments to all of my staff. Right before COVID. Been to China several times. Government flew me out. How many people can say that? So that's why you don't see me so often. So I post videos for the members at patreon.com/thesaintandthecenter or marquettism.com. Because let us not cast our pearls to swine. Yes, indeed. And thank you, Mike. I appreciate you. I want to, say a big thank you to Mike and all the loyal saints who have been supporting for a long time. And also know that when you support me, you're supporting the revolution. I am the revolution. I'm doing what a lot of men in my position would never do. They will never put all their money and all their accomplishments at risk to do what I do. Huh? Yeah, that's what's happening. So I appreciate that. For the ones who are actually members, you guys are in our Discord. You guys are part of our SaaS and security meetings, getting excellent trainings. All the work that I put in for this organization. So I thank all of you because just as I work for you, you work for this thing of ours, the SaaS, and so you are appreciated. So I'm gonna go ahead and get through these notes since I did indeed take out the time to create them. I'll get through these notes and then I'll go ahead and wrap this up. And I do want to again thank those who support the work. As I say, be good to good people, right? Be good to good people. There's so many folks who speak on the internet with no passion, for they have none, because they're just speaking for to make a buck. Um, Jamie comes back via Cash App. He writes, Nigerians so far their trial implementation. Yeah, the digital currency by a central bank is of course dangerous because it makes it easier for the government to control your liquidity and your access to capital. Um, this is as dangerous as the government taking away your right to bear arms. So you should be worried and fearful about it, and you should make sure that you can stay in physical cash as much as possible. But at the end of the day, the real power is in organization because it, at the if you really understand the world, you know that the world is merely a bunch of gangs raging against one another. And the question is, are you a part of the strongest gang? A gang that's going to support you and ride with you to the death? That's really the only question. The American government is a gang. The question is, do you have a strong gang supporting you? And I don't say gang in the negative sense. In the case of the American government, it is quite negative. They operate like a mafia, an immoral mafia. Deeply goaded, writes tuition paying what I owe. Truly appreciate you. Shout out to Little Cash Kid again, one of the loyal ones. You dig? And we got some loyal saints here. And shout out to all of you. I want to shout out to all of you who supported me on the Fresh and Fit podcast, not necessarily by donating, but more so by having your voice heard, being in that live chat, hitting the comments afterwards. I really do appreciate that. And I think you guys realize that I represent you. I represent the Center Nation. And so I appreciate you guys, being there and putting it in everybody's face. You dig? Spread the ism. Stop playing Trey writes, hey, Marquett, did you hit your wealth goal on 320? I did not. I think I was about I was $42,000 short. That was a very rigorous sprint to I was $42,000 short. And it necessarily wasn't because I wasn't pulling in enough money. It's because I was spending so much in investment. And so I spent so much money during that 14-day sprint, which makes sense. I hired a lot of people to do technical work. But yeah, I was way off. $42,000. I consider that to be way off. If you come up $42,000 short, you heard me. If somebody owe you some money and they $42,000 short, they way off. The beautiful thing about that wealth goal sprint is that I was able to identify two major issues. Number one is that I use too much of my time for things that don't earn much money. YouTube being one of them. So you'll see during the 14-day sprint, I didn't really make any YouTube videos because people don't support at a level that is close to my effective hourly rate. I want all of you guys to know what your effective hourly rate is. And what I mean by that is, like, if I go do something like as a CEO, I'm generally making around up to $800 an hour, just whatever I'm doing on a daily basis. If I go give a speech, I'm probably going to get like $13,000 for an hour of talking. So when I'm on YouTube, generally people aren't supporting the live session. So it's like I'm losing money when I'm talking. So during that 14-day sprint, I was really trying to hit my goal, which is why you didn't see me on YouTube. And I want you guys to be aware of your effective hourly rate because it's going to help you allocate your time. That's number one. Then number two, I realized that I'm doing too many things. I have a number of businesses that pay me money, but they don't pay me enough money. And so what I said to myself during that 2-week sprint is like, okay, some of these businesses I'm going to give up on. I'm not going to produce these particular businesses because the profit margin is not high enough and the volume of sales is not high enough. So even though it's making me like $4,000 or $5,000 a month, I don't need that $4,000 or $5,000. If I dedicate those same number of hours more to this business, it could be $17,000 a month. And so it really helped me reorganize how I'm living and spending my time. Thank you for that question. Saying, did you achieve yours? Hoping you did, of course. Let me know what you learned. And that's the most important thing is the lessons. Shout out to Rakely Swimming supporting the work. Again, one of the loyal saints I had the pleasure of speaking with one-on-one. You dig? Shout out to the Saint supporting the work. It'd be cool if one day we see everyone stand up. Shout out to Noor. He writes, Peace of the Saints. This is an important topic. I think people don't really realize. Shout out to A plus MVP again. Noor and A plus MVP. These are guys that I know well, always supporting the work, as well as Walton. Just tried to click yours. The chat moved. Yes, indeed. He says the weirdos represent themselves, but Assassin was in the chat strong too. You know, the funny thing is that I kid you not, I looked at that chat briefly and I noticed there was actually only two people hating. They just kept cutting and pasting so hard trying to create a narrative. It was quite funny and scary too, because I was like, man, I don't know who these psychopaths are, but they have such deep hatred. It almost makes you uncomfortable as to like, why you guys feel so much hate. Shout out to Tia. Shout out to all the lady saints supporting the work. She came in via Cash App. She writes, you are truly appreciated. Peace and saints. Thank you very much. That really does mean a lot to me. I acknowledge Vince, who is a member as well. Shout out to all the folks who have been members and will continue to be members. Carrying on. This is a fascinating situation. The Biden administration, because it's not a brave enough administration, it certainly doesn't have a high approval rating. They're scared to actually ban TikTok because they don't want to lose the vote of the young people. They don't want to lose the vote of the people who call themselves influencers, because if the influencers turn against you, then they can turn their following and their fan base against you as well. So I highly doubt the Biden administration is going to do that. And instead, the cowardly Biden administration has opted to suggest something that'll never happen. They've suggested that the Chinese owner of TikTok, which is ByteDance, that they sell their stake in TikTok such that essentially America or the West or people the Biden administration trusts can buy interests or ownership in TikTok so that it's not owned by the Chinese. Now, this is foolish for a couple reasons. Number one, TikTok is a very successful business in as much as they've actually revolutionized how social media operates. For example, they've maximized on the human psychology that demands that we all get attention. So they created the home feed where everyone had, or at least seemed to have, visibility, at least at the start of TikTok. So everyone, even if they only had 100 subscribers or 200, 300 followers, they could still have a video that had tens of thousands of views. And for that reason, people are like, oh, I matter. Like, people are seeing me. I have a chance. I can get discovered. I can become famous, even though they probably don't deserve it. So everyone felt like they had a chance. And what does that do? Well, that need for attention and that feeling of being seen and heard drives the creation of content. So people are just rapidly creating content on TikTok, whether it pays them or not. This also made us realize how feminine the male is today. They're doing all these prank videos on TikTok. And that caused the other technology companies in the social media sphere to do a race to the bottom, which is to say, to emulate what was giving TikTok success. And so YouTube said, oh, you guys are doing this, then we're going to have YouTube Shorts. And even though YouTube has historically been a horizontal type of platform where you kind of look at the screen and it looks like television, the wide screen, full view, the cinematic view, now they're doing the vertical, the shorts, which looks just like TikTok. And it makes it easier for everyone to discover new content and new content creators, which is actually quite the opposite of YouTube's algorithm, which generally pushes out to your home feed content that's similar to what you've already consumed or watched. Shout out to Tyzon's World. He writes, Peace of Saints. I'm wondering if I stay home with parents to save up for a 1-bedroom and film production studio business instead of moving out with roommates earlier would be a wiser move. It depends on what your strongest priority is. Life is about establishing priorities. Write down a list. What are the things that I really want? Okay, cool. It's these three things I really want. I want to move out of my parents' house. I want to buy film production equipment. Okay. And then you got one third thing, whatever that may be. Which of these is most important? Oh, it's this one. Cool. The other two don't matter for now. Hyper focus on the most important thing. Simplicity is what is going to allow for success. Now, as I was saying, actually, the question is, what was I saying, right? Give me a second. Get back to my notes. Yes, the Biden administration. Biden administration is too cowardly to actually ban it because they don't want to lose the influencer vote, the young person vote, and then the fans of those influencers. So instead, what the Biden administration has done is they've asked that TikTok, ByteDance, sells their stake in TikTok, their ownership, gives it up to an American company, which is not going to happen. It's not going to happen for a number of reasons. I'm going to explain why, and it's also a bad idea. It's not going to happen because number one, TikTok is a very influential and innovative company, and they created that whole concept of the reel. Now Instagram has reels, YouTube has shorts, and what are these? It's just a copycat of the TikTok ability for people to discover your new content using the vertical video format. That's all it is. So they revolutionized social media and they created a new model, a model of anyone being visible. So you got an innovative business, high usership, high daily active users, and high dwell time within the application. These are metrics that every tech CEO would want, and they can use this to raise oodles of money. They have tremendous brand recognition, everything in their favor. So why would they want to sell a business like that? Nobody wants to sell a horse that's winning races. That's stupid. So TikTok is not a good thing to sell because it's an asset. You want to keep it while it's growing and still making money. So ByteDance Corporation has no real financial incentive to sell TikTok. That's foolish. But that's what the Biden administration has proposed because they got to propose something except the obvious thing, which is just to ban it because they don't have the guts to do that. And they know that they'd lose the next election more easily. Oh, yeah, by the way, shout out to the ballers. Baller alert. Joshua writes, enjoyed you sharing your knowledge on F&F. I feel like I'm making a breakthrough in my entrepreneur adventures. Currently making a good salary, over 200K, which is a good salary. Any advice when I should quit my career to focus on business? Peace of the saints. Yes. When you have so much business that you really can't do your job, right? So whatever your job is, or as you put your career, if you have to go clock in and do an 8-hour shift, but you have so much business that you're like, oh man, I can't do my 8-hour shift because if I do that, then I'm not meeting my obligations in my entrepreneurial venture, my business. And your business as well is making more or as much money as that job. That's when I would probably cash it in and just go ahead and transition to that business. But you really want to get to the level of when you're going to get fired, right? I know it might sound crazy, but if you can maintain a job that's providing you health benefits, fringe benefits, and a steady salary, you really want to keep doing that job until you're doing it at such a low level or low quality and low level to where they fire you because you're showing up late and clocking out early so that you can work on your entrepreneurial venture to where they're about to fire you. Now, I don't know who that job is through or who your career is through, if it's like government or Fortune 500 company. But if you're betting on yourself and you seem to be a very reliable gentleman and your business is going really well and it's a business of the future, it's not going to be, you're not going to need to crawl back to this job. So I'd probably carry on and keep collecting that check until they're about to fire me. And I would increasingly try to reallocate hours on the clock to my own business because truth be told, that corporation probably doesn't love you as much as you love yourself. So you got to look out for yourself. And if things go ugly in that corporation or government sector, they'll do layoffs and you'll get laid off. So knowing that corporations don't have feelings, governments don't have feelings, you have to take a feeling for yourself and do what's best for you in the short and long term. So, and congratulations, that's a good position to be in. And that's a good question to ask. Happy to hear that. And it might sound ruthless. You might be thinking, wow, Marquette, that sounds ruthless. Well, we're not in a nice world. That's why I love being around the saints and living around the saints. They're good people. You can be good to good people, but the world is ruthless. Shout out to Stop Playing, Trey. He writes, I did not hit my wealth goal either, which is fine. The question is, what are the lessons that we use to excel in the next go. Right? But I did take away how to work backwards. Very good. After looking at your video and figured out what I need to do to hit my goal in the future. Exactly. And that's all it is. That's what the game is about. Peace of the Saints. So Biden has asked that ByteDance sells their stake or their ownership of TikTok, which is not going to happen. And here's the funny thing. China actually has law against this. Yes, I believe it was in 2020, and I'll confirm that for you shortly when I come across the note. China has a law that prevents Chinese companies from selling technology, certain types of tech, particularly those that are sophisticated AI, have algorithms. So if China literally has a law to prevent the sale of technology, why would Biden even say that ByteDance should sell TikTok when he knows that that actually cannot happen? He's just babbling. He just want to make it sound like he's going to do something, or that he's trying to do something, or that he's proposing ideas, but it's not a meaningful idea, because China would prohibit that, because the Chinese Communist Party has the power to veto any attempt of ByteDance trying to sell their interest in TikTok. So that's number one, why it won't happen. And then number two, TikTok's a good business. So why would you want to sell it? So it just doesn't make any sense. Call me Swaggy P.O. writes, dropped out of college to pull my time into my business. Excited to see if I can sink or swim. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. I just want to make a note that, sometimes dropping out of college is the right thing to do. But most times people drop out because they're lazy and incompetent. They're lazy and incompetent. That's why most people drop out. I'm not saying that's the case with you. I don't know. Generally, it wouldn't make sense to drop out of college unless your business is already successful. So when you say to see if I'm a sink or swim, you probably like screwed up how that's supposed to work. So don't connect those two things like they made sense. It doesn't make sense. If you dropped out of college because you didn't want to be in college, that's fine. But it sounds like that's what it was. I just want you to always be clear. As a man, you might lie to the world, you might lie to your girl, but don't ever lie to yourself. That's a quote. Somebody make that a quote. Send that to me on IG. I need to put that in the book that I'm going to make. I'm making a quote book. You might lie to the world, you might lie to your girl, but never lie to yourself. Somebody DM that to me on IG. Now, the reason I say that, Saint, is because it's okay to drop out of college if you just hated the course of study, if it's not going to lead to gainful employment, if you felt it was a waste of time, you weren't engaged, that's cool. Drop out of college because of that. You did not drop out to see if you could sink or swim. That's not why you dropped out. Because if it's a matter of business and entrepreneurship, you can do that while you're in college, because college is actually one of the easiest things to do. And if you're going to be successful in life, college is probably the easiest thing you have done up to this point, because business is much harder. I'll tell you why. In college, if you're going to take an exam, guess what? The whole class up to that point was about what's going to be on the exam. It's predictable. Business is unpredictable, requires creativity, innovation, guessing, trial and error, real risk. Radically different from school, much more difficult. When you say to see if you can sink or swim, well, you generally don't want to quit your job or your college until your business is booming. Just like I said to the gentleman earlier who has a career. I just want to be clear about that, I don't think those two things necessarily go together, but all the same, I want to see you win. And I hope that you can apply some serious discipline and diligence to your entrepreneurship. But one thing I can say, although I got a fraudulent degree, political science, on my first go at Berkeley, and then my second go at Johns Hopkins for a master's, I didn't stay in politics, but both the degrees are relatively fraudulent. But what both of those institutions taught me was how to be diligent, how to pull an all-nighter, how to work for 3 days on end, how to be focused, how to get things done, how to study, how to be consistent. It taught me the work ethic that was required to be an entrepreneur, because I was at elite institutions around intelligent people. It also gave me a great network. Had I not gone to university, I would not be as good of an entrepreneur, even though I did not study entrepreneurship like you can really study that in university. So I just want you to know that there is some value to be had. And don't create a false narrative of I dropped out to see if I was going to sink or swim, because I just don't want anybody deluding themselves. Doesn't mean you won't be successful. I just want you to be in the habit of keeping it real with yourself, because we're in a world that has a lot of lies in it. People tell lies to other people. They tell lies to their kids, Santa Claus, Tooth Fairy, whatever. Just don't tell lies to yourself. You're not going to be able to be successful in business if you're telling lies to yourself. There are a lot of things will get by you if you're telling lies to yourself. Shout out to Rick. He writes, Peace of the Saints, paying what I owe. Tuition for the freeloaders. Carry on, sir. Sir, yes, sir. It's always too many of them, isn't it? It's always too many of them. They never prosper, though. Shout out to JV Air, Sense Intuition. Jamie writes, how does one stop world news from affecting plans? Well, generally it doesn't. That's generally our boredom and delusion. We think all these things that we're hearing about in the world news is going to affect us. It mostly does not. It's mostly entertainment. So that's how. And there've been a lot of businesses that were built during recessions, and also remember that someone's always in a recession and someone's always in a bull market. It's your choice. Shout out to Altitude. He writes, Peace of the Saints. And what I mean by someone's always in a recession and someone's always in a bull market, a crackhead, for example, they're always going to figure out how to get some money to get their drugs. If there was a such thing as a real recession, like money just dries up everywhere, if there was a such thing, all the crackheads wouldn't be on crack anymore. All the fat people would slim down. All the casinos would shut down, but none of those things ever happened. Fat people are still fat. Crackheads are still high. Casinos are still booming during a recession. There's no such thing as a recession. The capitalist economy is cyclical, and human beings are goofy and foolish. And if you're one of the ones that has good information and a good network, you're going to win. Doesn't matter what the macroeconomic environment is or what the news is. Low Cash Kids writes, not balling like St. Joshua just yet. I know. Let us all get there, right? But tuition, if you don't feel generous enough to send a super chat, like and subscribe, it's free. Peace to the Saints indeed. And one of my main teachings is that if you can ever do something good for someone else and it costs you nothing, you should always do it, because it only adds to your goodness. You feel better because you did something good, and it also creates goodwill. And you can utilize goodwill for things. So yeah, it costs you nothing to click the like button. Click the like button. This is a metaphor for life. A plus MVP writes, and I'll give you a quick example of that, just to so you guys know how this can be lived out beyond the internet. So last night I was exceptionally busy, and I had a lot of customer service errors, lapses in customer service yesterday. It was quite a frustrating day. But as I was leaving a place where I went to go pick up my boxing tickets, because I went to the David Benavidez Caleb Plant fight, which was a beautiful, always a lovely experience. And I was there, and I was with Immortal Technique, and we were chatting about the fight. I was with Jabrizi, Immortal Technique. We're talking about the fight. I'm there with Caleb Plant's neighbors. It was such a great experience. But leading up to that, I was busy in the most hectic of ways. I got some bad information on where to pick up the tickets that were held for me. And when I had finally picked up the tickets and I was rushing to make my dinner because I hadn't eaten all day, and some people say they hadn't eaten all day, they're exaggerating. I literally had not eaten all day. And I was in a rush to get in my car and pull off out of valet. I didn't valet the car. I just parked in front of the entrance of this place illegally. So I get in the car, and this white woman walks up and knocks on my window. And my first, I was like, damn, shorty, you really knocking on my window? I just got a car wash. You dirty for that, shorty. I don't even know you. What's going on? So I look at her, and she wasn't looking like fresh or anything. So I was like, ugh, should I even roll down my window? Because as I say, I just want to be around truth and beauty. And wealth. You heard me? I avoid people who are broke and ugly. I'm not saying she was ugly or anything like that. She just looked a bit homely. But I rolled down my window. She's a woman. If it was a guy, I probably am like, skirt, skirt. You heard me? But I rolled down my window, and she says, gosh, you just look amazing. Can I take a picture with you? And I was so busy, and I was behind on everything. But in that moment, I said to myself, I'm going to be human right now, and I'm going to take out this time right now, because it seems like something that's going to brighten this woman's day. It seems like this is going to make her sincerely happy, put a smile on her face. And you know what? Once I did that with her, so I was like, yeah, sure. So I open my door, I get out of the car, and she puts her arm around me. What I think was her husband is taking the picture. And she puts her arm around me. She has the biggest smile and she's rubbing my suit. And she was like, gosh, she was like, you got some money. I know you got some money. She's like, this suit, that car, you look beautiful. Like this, thank you so much. I don't know where she's from in America, but seeing her smile and seeing her so happy, I did something for her, yes, because she asked something of me, but that also did a lot for me. Up to that point that day, I was so busy, so like so many people had screwed up. I was angry, I was intense, and that just cooled me out. Which is to say, when you can give something to someone that cost you nothing, it didn't cost me much to take out that extra 20 seconds to hear her out and try to do something as a favor. I just want to let you guys know when you can do something for someone that costs you nothing, but it makes them happy or does something good for them, but it doesn't hurt you at all, you should always do it. And I was so much happier going into the next phase of what I had to do that day after that experience. So I want you guys to take every opportunity to be good to good people or to be generous if it doesn't cost you anything and it doesn't put you at risk. Okay. Keep that part in mind. Don't forget that part. Anyways, carrying on. May I acknowledge A plus MVP? He writes, any update on building SaaS and HQ? Maybe you could have something like 20 of us Saints drop 10K to build it kind of like a masjid. You know what? That would be really interesting because I've been thinking a lot, like those of you who have been to my conferences, my mini conferences and the basic training, I was asking myself about like the space and how we could better design the space. Because one thing I would love to have is I would love to have a physical space where we have a boxing ring, some exercise facilities. We have a video studio. We have an audio studio. And we have some accommodations so some of the Saints can come in and take residency on a temporary basis for intensive study or intensive entrepreneurship. And we can utilize this space as like a community hub for the SaaS. And I think it could be brilliant. The land and construction is fairly expensive here in Las Vegas, but I'd be willing to build this in Arizona or maybe somewhere in Nevada outside of Las Vegas, or potentially in Colombia or in Belize or somewhere like that. So if this is something you're serious about, we can create a channel in the Discord and just make a small building to start with, get a couple acres of land, at least 2 acres, start with a small building. And then, any of the Saints who want to build their own project or residence on that land, they can put it there. I think it's a brilliant idea. May I acknowledge Devon writes, great show last night. Was there anyone or anything anyone said that stood out to you or an important point someone made that everyone should hear? Last, what did you take away from the conversation? I'm presuming that you're talking about the podcast, because last night I was at a boxing match. So I'm assuming you're talking about maybe the night before last, which was the podcast that we did with Fresh and Fit. With regards to things that stood out that were said, 2 things. One, I like what Mr. Waller said about having daily financial reporting from his businesses, which, truth be told, sounds like overkill, but the way he consumes the data sounds like he made it manageable. I respect that as a businessman. That was really good to hear. Always a good reminder. And then the other thing is I heard Michael, starts with an S. I want to say Strahan or something like that, but Michael Sartain. We spoke about geopolitics, and he had a high level of certainty in terms of Russian military capability. Now, maybe he's seen intelligence reports that I haven't, and in fact, I'm sure he has intelligence information that I don't. However, one of the most dangerous things for any of us is to be certain. Sometimes if we're certain about things that you can't be certain about, it creates a weakness and a vulnerability. Like if you're certain that your girlfriend's not cheating, so you're not using a condom because you're certain she's not cheating, but she is, and then she ends up giving you like syphilis or gonorrhea. Well, the only reason you were susceptible to that is because you were certain that she's not cheating, and so you didn't use a condom, right? So he was very certain, and it just reminded me like not to be too certain about everything. Those were the things that I thought twice about during the conversation. It was very pleasant, very educational from everyone. I enjoyed it. He says, what did you take away from the conversation? Yeah, very good. Thank you very much for that question. It's always good to reflect. Terrence writes, how do you think AI will affect tech jobs? I think that AI won't the way it'll affect tech jobs is that more people will be building AI. I think that's how it will affect tech jobs, and it will require greater levels of technical sophistication. I think the fear is how AI will affect non-tech jobs like writing and things like that, publishing. Um, he writes, demand for different tech roles increasing it's always going to be increasing. Tech jobs are always going to be increasing. There's just no doubt about that. He writes product managers, cybersecurity professionals, software engineers. Yeah, it's going to be increasing. Thank you for that question. Appreciate the Saint supporting the work. We have some more really good game out here to give. May I acknowledge Kendall writes Peace of Saints via Cash App as well. Brandon writes Baller Alert need a pick. Okay. He says, oh, lady said Baller Alert need a pick. Okay. For real though. Blaine writes, Peace of the Saints ordered the black box. Looking forward to the knowledge. And you will definitely enjoy it. And I'm always happy to hear your insights and what particularly struck you and what you gained from the read. It'll be an entertaining read. I can tell you that you'll chuckle, it'll take you on an emotional roller coaster, and always end with inspiration. Carrying on, let's get back to this work. One of the other curious things about Biden's administration suggesting that ByteDance would be foolish enough to sell TikTok, even though they're legally prevented from doing so by the Chinese Communist Party, is that if ByteDance, for some crazy reason, was sold to an American corporation, who could afford to buy it, right? It has 100 million users in America, which we have the most valued users because we are the greatest consumer in the world. So very valuable user base. And of course, they have users around the world. They were banned in India. We can talk about that in a second. But in India, they had 200 million users plus, and in other various markets, they have a lot of users. So what corporation would be cash liquid enough to be able to finish, excuse me, to finish, to be able to afford the TikTok price tag? So that's going to be the likes of a Meta, i.e., Facebook, or not even Twitter. They ain't got cash liquidity like that. But these kind of big tech companies that are already big players, which means they probably constitute a monopoly, and they've had a tremendous amount of user data. And monopolies in America are supposedly illegal, but we all know that that's not quite how things play out. So we know that it is quite unrealistic what Biden has suggested. The other thing that we should be mindful of, which is very comical, is that the claim, and this is shows you how foolish, either how dumb the government is or how dumb the government thinks you are, that they're not telling you the truth and they think you're going to believe everything they say. Check this out. The government's claim is that TikTok is dangerous because they might turn over your data to the Chinese Communist Party. Well, here's the funny part. The Chinese Communist Party already has all of TikTok's data. I know that for sure without being Chinese, or without being in the Chinese Communist Party, or without being within the TikTok company. I know that. Let me tell you how espionage and intelligence and all that works. So, for example, if you were to apply to the Federal Bureau of Investigation or the Central Intelligence Agency, there are a number of requirements that they have, and there are a number of types of degrees that make you more desirable. And there's also things called critical needs languages. Critical needs languages are like Pashto, Farsi, Urdu, Mandarin, Arabic, the languages of our enemies, essentially. Korean for the North Koreans. Those are the kind of languages they want you to speak, ideally at a native level, but if not, they'll accept it, right? So there's that. Then what are the degrees they want you to have? Accounting, engineering, science degrees, chemistry, biology, all these degrees, so that they could implant you into certain corporations. This is the American government. I'm sure the Chinese government is very similar. So, for example, what would happen is the Chinese government being intelligent and having a number of operatives, for example, in America, and I know because I applied to CIA and FBI. When I applied to CIA, I don't know if they still have this. They had a trainee program. I forget precisely what it was called, but it was something like a something trainee program. I can't remember the full title of it, but basically, for kids fresh out of college, you go into the trainee program, and then eventually they'll route you into a particular area of CIA. Point is this: if you were a smart kid in China, you went to a proper university, took a degree in software engineering, you were reasonably competent, maybe you built a couple of your own apps and you applied to be in the intelligence services, or more likely, you were recruited because they have good data and they know who's legit. You were recruited. People tend to have this James Bond view of espionage and spies and clandestine services, whereas that's actually not the case. You don't get a fake name. They don't call you 007. You don't get magical gadgets. Generally, the key is to recruit those who are going to operate under their true name, engage in things that are mostly quite mundane, and they're going to embed you within top corporations, within the nations that are, we're battling against. So, for example, what China would do intelligently is they would have their version of the CIA, their intelligence agency. They're going to recruit these smart kids in engineering, mathematics, and blah, 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 blah. And they're going to say, okay, you're now one of our agents. Cool. Now they see ByteDance producing TikTok, and TikTok's getting big and TikTok's expanding around the world. They don't have to go to the CEO of TikTok and say, hey, give me your data. No. All they do is send, 10 or 20 of these highly gifted software engineers who are 23, 24, 22, fresh out of college with a great resume and real skills, send them over as applicants to get hired by TikTok, which they will be hired because they're the best, and then let them pass over the data to the Chinese Communist Party while taking a salary from TikTok, making friends there, and living the life of a normal software developer who's also an intelligence agent of the Communist Party, and passing over all of the data, and maybe even every now and then writing some backdoors in the code, so the code can be accessible by government hackers. Yeah, come on now. Yeah, this is how it happens. The Chinese Communist Party doesn't have to request the information from the CEO of TikTok. That's silly. Oh, and here's another thing you guys should understand as well. Heterogeneous nations are generally weaker. Rome fell when it started to become too heterogeneous. The nations like Japan that are homogenous, everybody looks the same, it's kind of easy to spot out your enemies. They're not Japanese. Hey, we're all Japanese. We're all on the same team. That guy's white, enemy. That guy's black, foreigner. Like, you could tell when the enemies are within your midst. They don't look like you. They don't speak your language. They don't dress the same. They don't speak the same. So if you're in China, which I've been to China a ton, bruh, there's so few black people in China. Everybody want to take a photo with me. So few black people in Japan and various other places that are homogenous. It's easy for them to see the outsider, the foreigner, the enemy. In America, how do we figure out who our enemies are? Very hard. You can't visually detect them. And what's more, because of our liberal leftist policies, if you accuse someone of being the enemy, then they're going to turn around and say you're a racist just because you said the obvious. They might say, oh, this is Asian hate. Wait, what? Is Asian hate because we said the Chinese are our enemy? That's not Asian hate. That's reality. You heard me? The Chinese are our enemy. If we say the Russians are our enemy, that's not Russian hate. The Russians are our enemy. So the leftists make it a little harder. Let me give you an example. And shout out to the Chinese. I'm a big fan, and I hope that the Chinese government still views me favorably. You heard me? I'm a big fan. You did. But I went to University of California, Berkeley, which is a public institution and has historically been funded by the government and tax dollars, which is to say the American citizenry. And it's the first that they call it California University. It's like the first one. Like, it's a big deal. And I also believe this is where we've created weapons of mass destruction, right? At University of California, Berkeley, when I was there, it was like 44% ethnic Chinese, which is fine, except that many of them were foreign Chinese. These are not American Chinese who have been here for generations. These are foreign Chinese who are from China, which presents a couple problems. Problem number one, you have too much technology transfer and too many of our, you know, the latest in our knowledge and innovation leaving the country. That's number one. Number two, of course, they're essentially taking spots that could go to American kids who will be the future creators and producers in our weapons programs, right? And yes, the University of California, Berkeley is where we did create like big deal weaponry and like, you know, things on the order of like nuclear weapons, atomic bombs, like these kind of things, right? So what will happen is, you know, CIA is recruiting from University of California, Berkeley, Johns Hopkins, Harvard, Yale. These are the recruitment grounds, and they're recruiting people who are doing nuclear engineering, chemistry. What's that other one called? That's a really good one. Is escaping my mind right now. Physics, all this stuff, right? Now, when your best students in these disciplines are ethnic Chinese and you recruit them, some of them are ethnic Chinese, not from China. Some are ethnic Chinese from China. But the Chinese in America, they have something called Chinese school, which I have a lot of good friends who are Chinese Americans, and they tell me about Chinese school, which is a dope concept. You go every Saturday, you learn the language, generally Mandarin, maybe Cantonese, and you learn the culture. You know, what is it to be Chinese? What's our history? I'm a Han Chinese. What does that mean? So they keep your pride and nationalism very strong, which is to say, if this person is able to elevate and maybe be recruited by the CIA or the FBI, which has an inclusive policy now, uh, they will take this kid who's squeaky clean. He's a Chinese kid. You grew up playing violin, Yerby. You done went to Chinese school every weekend. You've been in tutoring. You had a lot of extracurricular. You look great on paper. You're a perfect person to recruit. You don't have a criminal record. Your parents are model citizens. Yeah, they recruit you. Uh, and then you start working in our weapons programs. And then you take a trip to China because why not? China's like a hub of innovation. It's a beautiful country, and you're Chinese after all. So you take a trip to China just to visit, maybe visit some family, or maybe just see the Great Wall of China. I've been to the Great Wall of China. It's astounding. So you go. And while you're there at the Great Wall of China, you at some point end up getting detained, and you're like, oh man, what did I do? You get detained, and then some guys come out to talk to you. They speak perfect English. Chinese guy, stylish, good looking, speak perfect English. And you're wondering if they're Americans. No, they're Chinese, but they're intelligence agents and they speak perfect English for good reason. And they explain to you what they need you to do and how you can help. And they have incentives for you, whether it's financial incentives, we're talking about millions of dollars, or they have other methods like blackmail. Maybe they know things about you that you didn't know they know, like you're homosexual, but your parents don't know because you're Chinese. Like that still ain't cool in Chinese culture. You dig? They still fairly traditional. Oh, yeah, we know you're homosexual. You didn't tell your parents that you're. Yeah, we know that you're engaging in homosexuality while you're at Berkeley, and we have evidence of it. And we can tell your parents unless you do us this small favor this one time. All kinds of tools. And then you go back from your trip to China and you continue working in your job, whether your job is at Google or at Facebook or at NASA or within a weapons company or within an aerospace company, Raytheon or, you know, Lockheed Martin. And then you pass information to the Chinese. Come on now. And we're particularly susceptible because our elite institutions have such high populations of the Chinese upper class. And Berkeley was one such situation. And that's why when I hear guys talk about how much they know in terms of intelligence or the military capability of Russia and China, I understand that they don't know what the real warfare is. The real warfare that China is waging against the world powers for hegemony is not about who has the greater number of surface to air missiles, tanks, stealth weapons and all this stuff. That's not how China's winning the war. They're winning the war in more fundamental and important ways. Okay. So I just want you guys to understand like how intelligence is actually gathered and the government either doesn't know, I don't think that's true, or they're just not acknowledging the reality of things. So if they think that if you change the ownership of TikTok, it's going to solve the issue, that's silly, because undoubtedly the Chinese Communist Party has already embedded a number of software engineers within that corporation. And there may be backdoors written in the code. There may be already automatic transfers of data. There's just so many things that may have already occurred, and you don't know who to pull out. You really can't fix it. You have to shut down that company. There's no buying it that's going to fix the situation. It's completely Looney Tunes. And for those who might be listening, thinking, "Oh, Marquette, like that that sounds like unrealistic or like a conspiracy theory." If you think that's a conspiracy theory, that's only a representation of your lack of knowledge. Like, for example, um, I could tell you so many things that sound fake, but you can see the unclassified documents from CIA, from the United States government, on so many strange things they've tried to do. Over 100 attempts to kill Fidel Castro, which, mind you, it's illegal to kill a sitting head of state of another country. That's illegal. Yet the American Central Intelligence Agency tried to murder him more than 100 times that are documented, and they declassified the information so you could read about it and see that it's true. But never did they talk about that publicly. It's declassified, which is to say public record, and there's actually a documentary called 101 Ways to Kill Fidel Castro. It's a documentary. You can watch it. But the point is, you never heard a government operative, politician, president say, yeah, we tried to kill him a bunch of times. It didn't work. Now, here's a funny thing. If Fidel would have said on the news, the American government keeps trying to kill me like every week, people would have been like, bruh, quit lying. Ain't nobody trying to kill you. You paranoid. You going insane. But turns out they were. They even tried to poison him so that his beard would fall out and people would think that he was sick and they would stop following him and they would try to replace him with someone who's not dying. Yeah, so many strange plots. The Saint comes back. He writes, I left college due to a roommate who never showered or washed his clothes. Also was surrounded by people who I felt bring me down. Peace of the Saints. Yeah, I mean, I figured, there was another reason, just because I've been in the college retention business. So I've seen a lot of data on the aggregate side. I've, of course, heard a lot of narratives. Those are curious reasons, but regardless, the key is to make your next move your best move. And if your next move is entrepreneurship, let's win. Let's win. I'm wishing you much success. I want to see you be wildly successful. And thank you for sharing that. Jay the Sinner writes, peace, Marquette. Special shout out to the Canada Saints in a real way. And shout out to Ramsey, the executive in Canada, in that region. Carrying on. Thank you to those supporting the work. I would, of course, like to see one person who's never done it before today. The funny thing is that Biden, I wonder, does the Biden administration have a policy that prohibits America from selling technology, certain kinds of technologies, to foreign nations that are hostile to us? I wonder, because China has that policy. China prevents their entrepreneurs and technologists from selling sophisticated AI, machine learning, and algorithms to foreign nations. Do we have the same protection? That's a good question. I'd be curious. Someone wrote that they sent a PayPal. It was not received. If you just want to make sure that maybe try to send $1 just to see if it's going through. I haven't seen one. And I have been checking, so I appreciate that. The funny thing too is that so often populations around the world are confronted by their governments with theater, meaning they show you things to make it look like they're doing something, even though they're not doing anything. So there was a publicly recorded uh, questioning of the CEO of TikTok, Shao Ji Chu, and he basically said that they have never turned over any information to the Chinese Communist Party, and they would never. Shout out to Joseph supporting by a cash app. Now, this is the funny thing. One thing I am sure of is if the Chinese Communist Party wanted that boy to turn over some data and they said turn it over, I'm sure he would turn it over. And if he, for some strange reason, said he wouldn't turn it over, I am highly confident that the Chinese Communist Party has a multitude of methods to make him do it. So, him making that statement is of no consequence because the most powerful man in the world on the whole planet Earth is Xi Jinping, which is the leader of the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government. He's also leader for life, low key. So even if Trump were to become president, the most powerful man in the world is still Xi Jinping. You understand? He's not operating in a situation where he has like some random white lady named Nancy Pelosi causing issues. He has like some random Latina named AOC, name so damn long we just got to use acronyms. He got some random black lady named Maxine Waters talking greasy about him, and he has a whole list of beta males who are trying to erode anything he's building. No, he has the Chinese Communist Party that is completely bowing down to what he says. They're in a highly hierarchical society, and they all know who the boss is, and the boss will not be questioned. He's the most powerful man in the world. So to think that this CEO of TikTok is saying that if he says, give me the information, I'm not giving it. No, you gonna give it, little buddy. And you ain't even gonna put up a fight if you got common sense. Because Lord knows I wouldn't. That would just mean that you're about to get your fingernails ripped out unnecessarily. And all of a sudden your whole family's probably gonna end up disappearing unnecessarily. So let's not go through all that. You smarter than that, my boy. You gonna give up that information. But here's the thing, the Chinese Communist Party doesn't have to ask for that information because they already got it. And they got it through the means in which intelligence services get information, which is covertly. And that's the key to covert, meaning no one knows. Furthermore, the beautiful thing about them getting the information covertly is that you are foolish enough, if you're a dimwit, to think like, oh, we have a secure technology. TikTok is secure. The Chinese Communist Party hasn't gotten to it yet. We can just sell it to the Americans and then they can make sure that it's protected. No, it's too late, and that's not possible. Let's not be foolish here. Furthermore, if you're running a technology, it's silly to think that you can have your servers in America and like store American data in America, and somehow there's no crossover between the information being shared in a global corporation. I mean, it's just silliness. Come on now. So the reason that it's so important when I do my lectures on trending news or on like very critical topics like this is because you get to hear, you know, not only what's true and false, but why a certain type of lie is told to you. Why a certain type of lie is told to you. Like, think about this. How embarrassing would it be for the American government to admit that they allowed 100,000 Americans to get onto a technology platform that's already compromised by the Chinese Communist Party? That'd be embarrassing. So you and I know that they're not going to admit that. And you and I also know that TikTok has already been compromised. We already know that. But the government can't admit that because then they would look like they had failed. And we know that they won't admit that they failed. I even heard Biden say that he's presiding over a strong economy. I mean, it's ludicrous. Is is utterly ludicrous. Now, let me speak to you a little bit about the international business implications. So, number one, big corporations, especially high tech corporations and heavy industry. When I say heavy industry, we might be talking about weapons. We might be talking about aerospace, flight, whether it's airplanes or individual man flight, like jet packs and hovercraft, drones, things that are expensive and require, high tech. It takes a lot of money to fund these kinds of things like electric car innovation, things like that. It takes a lot of money. So when you have an innovative entrepreneur, say like an Elon Musk type, and he wants to do a SpaceX or fill in the blank kind of thing, you're going to put together your money from around the world. Like for example, in my case, I've raised money from Puerto Rico. Talking about the government in Puerto Rico. I've raised money from the South Korean government. I've raised money from the Chinese government. I've raised money from municipalities in the United States, which say like city government, state government. And of course, I've raised a lot of private capital. Why? Because it takes a lot of money to do certain things. And in my businesses, we had hardware and software components. The hardware components are the expensive part of the business. Also, there were people in South Korea who saw my vision when a lot of Americans didn't see the vision. And so that's where I was able to create like my hardware component, which was one of my major innovations. And then I actually took that technology back to America and I was able to implement it in an American university environment. And, it was good for everyone. It was a net positive. South Korea funded it. America benefited. Also, South Korea benefited because we deployed in Konkuk universities and the Sky universities. So it was a good thing. And then China wanted to pile in more money. This is actually a necessity for heavy industry. It's a necessity for high tech. It's a necessity for big futuristic projects. It's a necessity for capital intensive projects. So if you don't have the ability to piece together capital from around the world, whether it's Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Monaco, Europe, or wherever the money might be, then you're crippling and slowing down innovation. And this is dangerous for business. This is dangerous for international cooperation and global capitalism. And most people don't understand that because they've scarcely put together a goddamn deal with the person across the street. They couldn't convince their cousin to give them $10. So they don't know a damn thing about going across the world and getting somebody to write you a check for 7 figures. But this is actually potentially a very dangerous thing. And this restrictive act, could have some good implications, but also some negative implications because they're essentially suggesting that if ownership comes from abroad, any of our enemy countries, then that technology, be it software or hardware or an electronic or a smart device, is subject to being canceled or shut down or banned. And this is quite problematic. I want to read a little bit to you. This is the Congress website, which is to say congress.gov. And this is on this is a bill from the 118th Congress. This is Senate Bill, I believe, 686. And this one is this is what I was talking about, the Restrictive Act. And I wanted to just make a few notes to you all. It says if this funding or ownership is coming from a foreign adversary, and they've defined who their adversaries are. And this is the government, right? This is quite comical because these are not necessarily the adversaries of the American people. These are the adversaries of the American government, right? If they're really adversaries, who knows? But I'll tell you who they define as adversaries here. So they said their adversary is China. Okay, it says the People's Republic of China, including the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, and Macau Special Administrative Region. That's one enemy. Another enemy is the Republic of Cuba. Now, when was the last time Cuba has been a threat? Come on. I mean, this is comedy. Their other enemy is the Republic of Iran. Has Iran ever really had a problem with us, or do they have a problem with the country that we're funding? Israel. We're funding Israel. We're giving Israel intelligence, weapons, spare parts, all the things they need to basically dominate that region. So that's really why Iran has an issue with us that we created. By we, I mean the government. It says the Democratic Republic of Korea, which is to say North Korea. Now, we split their country in half. That was not quite a good thing. That was far outside of what should have been our sphere of influence. The American military is very aggressive and thoughtless, has no real geopolitical strategy except dominate everything, which is not very clever. And are they a real threat to us? Absolutely not. They're a retrograde economy, small country, insufficient population. They're on the flank of China, so we're never really going to invade them because basically, if we invaded North Korea or if South Korea brokered a deal with North Korea to become one, and basically that would mean American hegemony in that region, well, China would not allow that to happen. This should sound familiar. Let me school you. This is why I am the master of geopolitics. North Korea is right bordering China, right? It's right next to China. Okay, so that's like a buffer country. This might remind you the way Ukraine is right next to Russia. It's a buffer country, which means that your enemies at least have to go through another country before they get to you. It gives you a little bit of time and space between you and your enemies. You have to protect your borders. You cannot have enemies at your borders. It causes problems. Like, for example, China and India share border. And there was actually some fatalities that actually caused India to remove all of their country from TikTok. India was the only country that banned TikTok entirely for the citizenry, and it's because of that very situation. It was military conflict on the border. You don't want your enemies on the border. So the reason that the Russians had to take over Ukraine, and they did a terrible job, in my opinion, is because they have to protect their border, protect their flank, and have that buffer. The same reason that North Korea must exist, and China will not allow North Korea to basically become South Korea. I acknowledge. Saying comes in by Cash App. He writes, I'm Turtle Main, been watching months. First contribution. Appreciate it. Everyone, may we all congratulate him. Good to welcome him to this thing of ours and thank him for standing up. Do appreciate it. I acknowledge Mitchell comes in by PayPal. He writes, being a part of the Assassin is truly an honor, peace of the saints. And shout out to Mitchell. He is also one of the saints that is confirmed, meaning that we know Mitchell well. He's been officially confirmed in ceremony. He's one of the real ones. You can trust him. You can respect him. He's a boss within this thing. Shout out to Marcos and Mitchell. Big dogs. Carrying on. We got so much game in this one, Saints. So much game. Yeah. Shout out to Turtle Man. A donation is something you would give to like a homeless person or to like a charity, which means you didn't get anything back. Tuition is something you would give for education, which this is mostly education, or a fee to a consultant or something like that. But I don't need donations. I'm doing pretty well. You heard me? It's just really acknowledgement. Hey, I appreciate it. Shout out to Emery. Oh yeah. By the way, shout out to the ballers. Baller alert. He writes, I am 24 years old, working a 9 to 5, making $24 an hour. Looking to tap into hyper focus. That's very good. Real estate, personal brand, clothing, or pursue a degree in computer science. Which way do I go? Peace of the Saints. Well, number one, I would out of these three, I would recommend computer science. But if I were you, the question is, do you have the patience, temperament, attention to detail to endure in computer science? And there's a lot of free computer science courses. I can't remember the name of any right now, but there's a number of free computer science courses and exercises that you can do to start learning. So I don't know if you have done any of that, but I highly recommend you do to see if you have the temperament, because it is tedious. It's not necessarily easy. That's why it pays well. That's why everyone doesn't do it. Highly recommend against the clothing. Very crowded vertical, difficult to make money. Profit margins are low. Customer service is a heavy lift. It's just not a good business. We have a nation, the Saint, the Sinner Nation. You hear me? That comes with a uniform. We want everybody to be, representing us. That's mostly why I do it nowadays, because the profit margins suck. Like, you're not making any money in clothing, and real estate is a great business, but we have to figure out, are you a real estate investor or are you a real estate agent or broker? Those are different things. Real estate investor, owning real estate, that's smart, but to do that, you're going to need some money. So I'd probably start off with that computer science degree. Wishing you much success. Shout out to Saint Re, who following our tradition welcomed the gentleman warmly. who came in with his tuition for the first time and is new to this thing. That's a beautiful thing. See, we welcome folks warmly. As I said, the world out there, it can be harsh and unpleasant. This is a refuge for those who are intelligent. This is a refuge for geniuses, you dig? Says thoughts on DeSantis. I think DeSantis seems to be a reasonable person, and of course, knows how to gain power and probably has everything needed to win the next election. However, I just think this is still Trump's time. I think this is Trump's time, and I'd prefer to see DeSantis sit down. And I think we need some. We're in desperate times. We do need someone who is ready to be heavy-handed because that's the time that we're in. And I don't know that DeSantis is heavy-handed enough for what is required to basically give the country a complete turnaround and set us on a new track. But I think he has clear thinking, and I don't know a whole bunch about him. And I think part of that is his failings in terms of the branding side of things. But I think he's a sane person, and that's not what we need right now. I don't think we need a sane person right now. I think we need somebody who's lit right now. You dig? Yeah, well, like in the context of what we're dealing with in America, we don't need a sane person right now. We got some wild stuff going on. And shout out to Uganda, you dig? Because Uganda just passed some epic laws. I need to go have a visit. Can we just set up a meetup in Uganda? We need a meetup in Uganda in a real way. So I did discuss how the restrictive law that's going to be potentially passed that'll empower the Secretary of Commerce with new powers will be very challenging for international business, namely tech. It'll probably slow ability to find financing and thereby innovation. But what's worse is it essentially politicizes commerce. And we don't want to politicize commerce. It's funny because even during war, commerce continues. It's been quite unprecedented that the Russian banks, that banks were pulled out of Russia. That's quite unprecedented. Even if you look at the Nazi regime, World War II, Hitler was being financed by foreign banks. Yes, it's true. Commerce continues during wars, gentlemen. That's the funny thing. That's how you know a lot of these wars are scams. These wars are scams. I mean, nobody can really explain the true reason that we invaded Iraq. Is Iraq better off now? Somebody let me know. Yes, this stuff is a scam. And that's because we're being led by wicked people. Just is what it is. But let's get back to our core topic. What you'll hear a lot increasingly as there's an effort to combat the Chinese Communist Party slash TikTok is you're going to hear TikTok utilizing their influencers to defend them, which makes perfect sense because they both have the same interests. Their financial interests are tied up together. And as I referenced earlier, intelligence agencies typically utilize money, sex, and blackmail, money, sex, blackmail, extortion to get someone to do what they want. This is obviously utilizing money. The TikTok influencers are making millions of dollars on TikTok. So, of course, they don't want their primary source of fame, clout, and income to disappear. Hence, they have every interest, even though it's against the America's national interests, whether it's economic or safety, they have every personal, selfish interest to make sure that TikTok thrives so they can continue shaking their booty and showing their butt cheeks on TikTok so that they can make money from the ad revenue or from the tips that they get from the dimwits. So you're going to see all these big popular TikTokers saying, oh, we need to protect TikTok because of freedom of speech, because of this and that. You even had the ACLU, which is supposed to be something like a civil rights organization. The ACLU said that we need to protect TikTok. because this would be an unprecedented thing in America. And America is supposed to represent digital freedom. Number one, America has never been viewed by any other country as a bastion of freedom. Those are things we tell as propaganda to American citizens. But foreigners do not believe that, okay? What foreigners know about America is that we're a wealthy country, and that's why they come here for opportunity. They don't come here because they think we have oodles of freedom. They come here because they think we have streets paved in gold, okay? And we really could if we didn't waste all the damn money on the military, okay? And being hyper aggressive and neo colonial in a bad way around the world. So that's number one. Number two, with regards to organizations like the ACLU, it's quite comical because they're claiming that they're doing this in favor of freedom of speech, when in reality, we know that it couldn't be in favor of freedom of speech because they didn't speak up with more significant freedom of speech issues occurred. Like, for example, when TikTok banned the sitting president of the most powerful nation in America. That was a major error in freedom of speech. So, how do you think that us banning an application that is primarily circled around libido, need for attention, and entertainment, that is booty shaking, attention whoring, and skits for laughter? How is banning that technology a freedom of speech issue, but banning the president of America from speaking direct to the public? How's that a lesser issue? The ACLU didn't stand up for Trump and his freedom of speech. So this is very hollow, and we have to wonder, who's pulling the strings in the background. It's quite scary, the era that we're in. And it's also further quite comical that influencers, which means basically, you know, unschooled youths and thoughts, that's who's reigning on TikTok, you know, fools, young fools. How is it that we're acting as though their freedom of speech is critically important? In fact, their freedom of speech is some of the most dangerous freedom of speech, because they have the freedom to speak idiotic things. They have the freedom to speak ideas that are not true, ideas that can be detrimental to youth. They have the freedom to sexualize themselves and provide sexual imagery to people who are not of the proper age. But these are the folks that we're supposed to be listening to. They even had these folks on Capitol Hill lobbying our politicians. It seems as though India banned TikTok 3 years ago in June 2020. Guess what? India is still fine. Their country has not imploded from banning an application circled around young women with no morals shaking their butt. Oh, yeah, by the way, shout out to the ballers. Shout out to Carlo. And let me know if I accidentally, I think I might have clicked the wrong button, Carlo. I hope I didn't accidentally like put you in timeout or anything. Let me know if I did. But I think I just showed your baller alert, which is what I meant to do. And Carlos, I think I had the pleasure of meeting Carlo at our one of our conferences. It's Carlo in Tech, if I believe correctly. Shout out to the ballers. He writes Peace to the Saints. He's just supporting the work. Shout out to the real ones. You dig? So I want you guys to know that Biden's proposed concept of an American investor or company buying or taking over TikTok. Okay. Okay, got you. Thanks, Carlo. Buying over or taking over TikTok is not realistic, because that's not going to modify the source code. That's not going to make sure there's no backdoors in the source code. And that's not going to change all of the employees, any number of which may have been already compromised, and are certainly, if they weren't compromised, they were sent directly into that organization by the Chinese Communist Party. I mean, that's just basics. Any fool who's an amateur in, security, domestically, or even international espionage, that would have been a super simple move to make. Saints, I'll give you some time to send in your comments, questions as we wind down. And Carlo, yes, indeed, one day it shall happen. I look forward to it. I hope this talk has been very insightful and blessed you guys with some perspective that you may not have had. Parker writes, the plant fight. Oh, I think you meant taught. The plant fight taught me how hard one needs to work to be the GOAT in his field. Yet, what we have seen consistently with Caleb Plant, and I've actually been to all of his major fights. I've been there, either on the floor seats, you heard me, or at that seat. My favorite seat is right before you get to the floor because you're specifically aligned with the boxing ring, so you actually have the best view. The floor seats is basically you got the bad chick, or she's wearing like all this sparkly stuff. All the stars are there. They got their jewelry on. You're sitting next to Two Chains. Dave Chappelle's behind you. Dan Balzerian's in front of you. That's why you sit in the floor seats. But if you're a boxing fan, you want the seat that's right before the floor seats because you have the very best view of the fighting, which is what I want. I love boxing. I also love being around bad chicks and celebrities too, which I was next to two celebrities. But Caleb Plant is a phenomenal boxer, especially in the early rounds. But what he's not been able to do is to adjust his strategy based on his gas tank. You see, Floyd Mayweather was extraordinary because his gas tank was infinite and he could last through the whole thing. Caleb Plant gasses out around the seventh or the eighth round, and then basically he gets cooked every time. That's what happened against Canelo. That's what happened against Benavidez. I'm also making a prediction that Benavidez is going to body Canelo and become the new Mexican hero. And you might be able to make a bag on that one. Shout out to Rooks. He writes, thanks, Saint, for the information. I needed the motivation. I'm happy to hear that. Always happy to inspire. Smoke says he came in on PayPal. So let me see. Barack writes, when was it that the white man, quote, dropped the ball while the Asians, Indian, Chinese, took over? I'm really curious as to how and why these two specific groups have been successfully attempting to replace the position of the American man. Why haven't other populations been as ambitious to take this? This is a very deep question, and I could do an entire live session on this. I do have one live session called The Fall of the White Man, which I think is quite long. It's on patreon.com/the Saint in the Center, and it is definitely worth looking into. Now, when you say when, I think the signal of the white man in decline was when he gave suffrage to the white woman. I think that was the start of it. That's number one. Number two, the Indians, I think the Indians still have yet to really assert any power. They have great technologists, they have significant population, but they're not influential on a world scale yet. In my humble opinion, like when I travel around the world, like you see a lot of Indian people. They've exported their people effectively, as has China, but they've not exported much else effectively. Like you never see them doing construction in other countries that I've been to. You don't see, Hindi or whatever, language you'd expect, in other countries. So they're not dominating the world the way the Chinese are. So truthfully, I don't think India is really a part of the conversation yet. I think India still is rather unimpressive from a power perspective. And I've been to India. I was in Mumbai just a couple months ago. Had a great time. I love Indian people. I love Indian food. I can't handle it, but I love Indian food and Indian women from India, not these American ones, but the ones in India. Oh, they are a dream. Long black hair, all natural. They haven't fried the hair with dyes and bleaching. It's long, reaching down to the wagon, braided up, super feminine, nice browns, dark skin, fine as all get out, feminine, slim. Some of them be fat though. They do get fat. The Indian women will get straight fat. When they hit 19, 20, they get a kid. It's all bad, but great women. Anyways, India is not a world power. Full stop. China is a world power. They shouldn't even be in the same sentence, really. China has been trying to become a world power for a long time. They do have a phenomenal history and they're very nationalistic people. But the truth is that China was actually the China we see today as a result of what was developed under the Russian communism. And this was, essentially Vladimir Lenin was the architect of modern China. And the Russians used to actually give a lot of technology transfer and a lot of know-how and a lot of ideology to the Chinese. That's how the Chinese became communists. They were supported by the Russians. This is where Mao, of course, there's Maoism, but the root of that was Leninism and Marxism. And a lot of what China is today has been in development from a long time. One, when they got in bed with the Russians, all the way through the Soviet Union. But when the Soviet Union fell apart, China never fell apart. And a part of it is because of the economic reforms by Deng Xiaoping. I want to say I was in the 80s. But I haven't reviewed this stuff in a while. But it was Deng Xiaoping which created the modern China, which is essentially a capitalist country. And it was Mao that created the nationalism and the fervor and the hierarchy and the political structure that allows China to move so efficiently because they don't have the same kind of disharmony among their political class that you have among the American Democrat and Republican, who are actually quite similar, but still they bicker for power. And China, you know who the boss is. So we're not about to waste any time with that part. Um, and then you say, why haven't any other populations taken over? The Africans are in a fairly despicable state. I think that we forget that the Africans were the first to have hegemony. So the African nations were the first to be like great rulers in their land or on a global scale. So the Africans were first. They were very early. In some ways, you would almost say prehistoric or prehistory, in as much as the historiography is rather incomplete, particularly because it's from European sources. And there are a lot of things that they deny from the Africans. If you'd like to get a better treatment of African history and understand like the true wealth of guys like Mansa Musa, the Songhai policy, Songhai Empire, Mali, and various places outside of Egypt, Nubia, and all these other places. Ivan von Sertima is a great source of that, and I have one of his books in my Amazon list. If you go to amazon.com/shop/the Saint in the Center. So what essentially happened is, like, in terms of like big civilizations, you had the Africans first. The empires in Latin America existed fairly remotely. Then you had the Europeans take hold, and China had great empires as well. But the Europeans were kind of the first to really bleed outside of their borders and take over other nations. And then the Chinese are reacting to the establishment of that model. And that model is really destructive. The European model has been destructive and probably will end the world, because you have the Chinese now have that model, and everyone's fighting for dominance. And so this probably will be how the world eventually ends. Thank you for that question, Saint. And truth be told, I guess unless the assassin civilization takes over, and so that's really what we're working towards, such that the assassin civilization takes over, we can establish world peace. You dig? Saints, it has been a pleasure to have this time to fellowship with you all. And let us end with our tradition, the creed of the assassin. Repeat after me with full conviction, knowing this is true of you. The creed of the assassin. Oh, I think I miss. I don't want to. I want to honor those who honor me. So I missed a few of these. Rooks Wayne writes, "Thanks, Saint, for this information. I need." Oh, okay, I got that one. This is the one I missed right here. Does it mean plant does not work hard enough? No, I think that plant works pretty hard. In fact, I've actually been in. We shared a gym. Even Justin Gamper, his trainer. I don't know if he's still with Justin, but Justin even asked me to spar with him. I mean, they work very hard. Um, I think the issue with Plant is boxing IQ, fight strategy. I think their fight strategy is insufficient, and I think the boxing IQ is not there. When I say boxing IQ, yeah, tune them up, hit them, use footwork, grab them, cool, that's great, but you need to manage your energy based on your gas tank. And if you know that all that footwork and all that movement you used in round 1 through 6, you can't sustain that for 12 rounds, then you need to know that round 1 through 3, really not round one, because round one, you're just feeling out. No one's throwing power in round one. Round 2 through 6, you need to take punishment. You need to figure out how you can position yourself to take some hits, ideally on the gloves, to basically infight him if you can survive infighting, if your infighting skills are good enough, and if you can take that punishment or fight off the ropes, basically preserve your energy so that you can dance and take all the later rounds. Like, you have to have a plan. So I think the fight strategy has been off, and that's really something that Justin Gamper or his coach or his conditioning folks would need to look at. I think the fight strategy's been off. I think he's had the skills to beat anyone. Also, I don't think he has much power, which they say power is a natural thing. If you ain't got it, you ain't got it. But shot placement, and if you can exhaust an opponent and hit them with targeted shots, at the right locations on the body and the chin, even if you don't have tremendous power, you can get him out of there. So I think if he has better fight strategy and manages himself better and exercises better boxing IQ over the 12 rounds, he can be a champion again. I don't think that's going to happen though. So sometimes people get confused into thinking that it's about working harder. It's about working smarter and also understanding who you are and what you can do and utilizing the best of your natural gifts. So I think that that's kind of the failing, is that he wasn't utilizing the best of his natural gifts at the right time in particular. Timing is also a key. Shout out to Parker. He writes, I want to understand, do you think Caleb Plant works hard enough? Yeah, I do think he does work hard enough. I think that boxing is a mental sport, and his mental wasn't good enough to win that match.